Hello, Gary Stearman. Today's guest on Prophecy Watchers is a global traveler, but he's also a deep thinker. And that deep thinker and global traveler is Tim Alberino. And Timothy, it's good to see you again.
Very nice to be with you again.
Tim has done things that a lot of us would like to do, but when it came to actually doing it, we would probably say, no, I'm going to I'll let Tim do it, like rowing down the backwaters of the Amazon and catching malaria. And no thanks, that's not for me. But on the other hand, you've done some exciting things that have given you a way of approaching Bible truth in a totally unique manner. And it kind of background yourself so that people who are not familiar with Tim Alberino can get a little taste of what you do.
Well, I grew up in a very good Christian home. And so the Bible, the biblical narrative, and frankly, a personal relationship with the Lord has always been the foundation of my life, always, ever since I was young. And that sort of led me on a journey when I got older. When I was 18, 19 years old, I was very hungry to encounter God and to understand, comprehend things that I was striving to comprehend, biblical truths and so forth. And so that sort of led me into the Amazon. And that's a long story. I won't get into why I ended up going to the Amazon. But
that's a book.
That is a book. And so when I was very long story short, I found myself living literally in the Amazon, the deep jungle, when I was 19 years old, 20 years old, and began, this is going to sound strange, but it's true. You know, I dropped out of high school to move to the Amazon, and it's when I got to the Amazon that my intellectual pursuit began, which sounds strange. You know, I drop out of high school, move to the jungle, and that's when this intellectual pursuit of the biblical narrative and of the gospel, and really beginning to understand for the first time what the story of the gospel was, began in the Amazon.
By the way, this book is worth reading because it connects ideas for Christians. If you're interested in going to, shall we say, the next level in spiritual exploration, and the level that involves understanding God's motive, the ages past, the things that he's doing right now in this world. And by the way, I've got a question. What's the elder race?
Well, the reason why I decided to invent this designation, elder race, for this class of beings we're familiar with as the angels. That's the familiar reference that we have in Christianity and from the biblical narrative. The reason why I created this designation is because the term angel, as you know, is ambiguous.
It is.
It's a very ambiguous term, but yet these beings are very important, and they're prominent in the Scriptures. So you have an ambiguous term that's used to describe this very intriguing race of entities that are out there. And so, and I believe that the word angel, malak in the Hebrew, angelos in the Greek, is intentionally ambiguous. And as you know, the word angel and malak, both in the Hebrew and the Greek form of the word, is used to describe not just the heavenly beings, it's also used to describe, because the word means messenger, let's say that. The word means, it's an envoy, one who has sent a messenger. It's used to describe human beings also, who are functioning in the capacity of an envoy or a messenger, both in the Hebrew and in the Greek. So the term is very ambiguous. And it's not a designation of kind. So it doesn't describe the kind of being, it's a designation of occupation. It's an occupational designation. So when we encounter the angels in the Bible, they're being described as angels, they're being described as messengers, as envoys. And that's how we find them in the Scriptures. And so that really got me thinking, okay, this is what they do. They're
Right.
angels in the sense that they convey messages. They're envoys from the kingdom of heaven, from the king himself. But what are they? Who are they? What is their nature? Where do they come from? And this really got me thinking, well, they must have a history, just like we do. The human species, we have this long storied history now, the history of civilization, of human civilization and so forth. Well, doesn't that also then apply to these beings we call angels? And so I wanted to give them a designation that was more descriptive. And so when I thought about it, two characteristics were immediately apparent. First, that they're older than us.
Yes.
I think that's clear. I think that's evident in the biblical narrative. They are older than we are, okay? So that makes them elder. So they're certainly older than us according to the biblical narrative. And then secondly, they...
More experienced.
Much more experienced, much more knowledgeable than we are. And then the second thing is they must constitute a race. I mean, if they're not a race, what else are they? So we're talking about an older race, an elder race, a race of beings that pre-exists mankind and whose civilization pre-exists our civilization. In fact, I believe, have inherited our civilization from them.
And by the way, ours is a finite civilization. Human civilization has a definite starting point. We get it in the Bible. There's no doubt about it. But those messengers, really, where'd they come from? How long have they been around? Where were they before humanity existed? What were they doing? And so that gets us started on a great search for something interesting.
Those are very powerful questions you just asked. Questions that a lot of people don't contemplate. How many people actually contemplate, is there a history here? Is there a history here with these angels from the biblical narrative? And do they have a civilization? Are we talking about, do they have technology?
Yeah.
Do they have a society? And I believe that the biblical narrative, the answer is unequivocally yes to all of those. And by the way, their civilization, where do they come from in terms of their civilization? The kingdom of heaven is the answer in the scriptures. That's the answer that the scriptures gives us. They come from the kingdom of heaven. And so when they come to the human race as in the capacity of an envoy, they are coming with a message. They're dispatched, carrying a message from the kingdom of heaven to mankind, and specifically from the king.
You know, you have just really opened up a large pool of questions here, and the questions bring to my mind odd facts like, yeah, there's a heaven. Everybody talks about heaven. Even people who do not believe in God or Jesus particularly talk about heaven. Oh, it was heavenly. It was, oh, it was just like heaven there. I went to the Bahamas. It was like heaven. Well, how do you know? You've never been to heaven. Well, but people talk about heaven. But where's the door? How do you get into heaven? Nobody I know has ever been there. So this book, and the reason I'm going through this exercise is because this book kind of takes you through the door.
Yeah, heaven. This place, heaven. It's a locality. It has an address somewhere. It isn't just this abstract, ethereal thing. It's an actual place.
Right.
And so the question then becomes, and by the way, when we talk about heaven, we're also talking about the Father's house. This is how it's described in the scriptures. Jesus describes this as in my Father's house are many mansions.
Right.
So this is a place that has locality. And in the book, I postulate a new theory that new for me. Perhaps it's floating out there somewhere. But I postulate in the book, and I may or may not be right. It's just kind of an intellectual exercise that I do in the book. What if the Garden of Eden in paradise wasn't actually on earth? What if it was the gate to paradise that was on earth? And so I believe that Adam had access to the Father's house in the beginning, and I believe, and again, I could be wrong, but as an intellectual exercise, I go through this in the book. What if paradise is heaven, and that the gate to paradise was on earth? The gate to paradise was on earth, and it functions as what's known as an axis mundi. That it's an entranceway into another realm, rather than that place actually being on the earth. Instead, the gate is here, and furthermore, and this is kind of giving away the punchline to that thought. Furthermore, I postulate that that gate was actually located on the summit of Mount Hermon. And in precisely the place where we find the watchers coming to the earth through the gate on Mount Hermon. So I think that Adam had access to that gate in the beginning until he was shut out.
Now, hold that thought. And while you were talking, I was thinking about our magazine, the Prophecy Watcher, and from time to time we have guest authors like Timothy and many others, and the subjects upon which they write are just very close to what we're talking about today. We like to go a little deeper than others might. And here's how you can get your subscription to the Prophecy Watcher.
Each month, the Prophecy Watcher magazine arrives in thousands of mailboxes all around the world. Our newly expanded 48-page magazine features cutting-edge articles written by the top prophecy experts, writing about things you may never hear about in church. Examine the giants of Genesis 6, the future wars prophesied for Israel, the rapture of the church, prophecies about the Antichrist and the tribulation, the rebuilt Jewish temple, the Book of Revelation, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, and so much more. You can subscribe to the digital version of the Prophecy Watcher for $20 a year. Subscribe to the print version for $30 a year. Or for a very limited time, we're offering a lifetime subscription to either the digital for $100 or the print magazine for $150. It's the gift that just keeps on giving. Call the toll-free number on the screen or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv to take advantage of this limited time offer.
Well, I hope you'll take advantage of that. And while we're gone, I was thinking of another question. Because I'm thinking of the gate at the Garden of Eden that was guarded by a couple of cherubim, which means that if it had to be guarded by cherubim, maybe it took you into a different dimension when you went through the gate.
I can't imagine that the cherubim are guarding entry to the paradise of God against Adam and Eve and his offspring. It seems to me that the cherubim and the flaming sword and so forth are actually prohibiting entry of somebody else and something else, perhaps the devil and his angels from gaining access to paradise. That would seem more appropriate, because I doubt that Adam and Eve and their offspring could even see the gate anymore, or we certainly can't. We don't have access to it anymore. So there's something very interesting going on there. I think is more there than we originally think.
There really, really is. You know, we read about those goings on. For example, in the first chapter 1, first chapter of Job, there's a meeting between Satan and a group of angels and God. And it's obviously a seminar. You know, sit down, we're going to have this long discussion, we're going to ask questions. And the whole book basically is a series of questions about what did God do and why did he do it, and why did Satan essentially object to what he was doing. And it's kind of a seminar. And I should say that Job was the seminar, and someday I'm going to meet that man and ask him a couple questions. But until then, and your book, when I read your book, it puts me in that frame of mind. It takes me to places that I really want to go the next step, and that's what I like about it.
Well, I appreciate that, and you know, and really, while I was writing this book, I was forced to, instead of just kind of superficially glossing over certain topics, I was forced to dig deeper into them, because I'm a very practical person. And my mind is very, I like sequence. I like things in sequential order, and I like to think as logically and rationally as I can about things. And when you begin to unpack some of the things that we're talking about, so many Christians, I believe, have a belief in the scriptures, they have a belief in the biblical narrative, and obviously a belief in Christ. But there's almost like there's a curtain between this physical reality that we are experiencing right now and the reality of the biblical narrative as it pertains to angels and so forth. and this other realm that we find interacting with our realm continually throughout the biblical narrative. It's almost like there's this curtain there, and everything on the other side of that curtain is just fuzzy and abstract and intangible. When I think that in reality that's not the case. I believe that on the other side of that curtain, things are much more tangible than we can imagine, and real and physical and so forth. And it just, when you begin to unpack things, like you begin to think about the angels as a civilization,
Yeah.
it becomes palpable now, because now you're talking about things that we're familiar with. You're talking about language and knowledge and history, technology, the kinds of things that we think of as human, when in reality those concepts predate us. Even the concept of government, the concept of society itself, and all the things that go with society, like armies and governance and judicial system. That's all predated us.
The black market. That's what came to my mind, believe me, because you mentioned Mount Hermon and the fallen ones who came down through that perhaps gate at Mount Hermon, and they came selling accoutrement.
That's right.
The weapons of war.
That's right.
And whatever else you wanted to buy. So they were kind of black marketeers.
And that's really interesting. I really thought about the Watchers and that whole scenario, and some things occurred to me, some interesting things that I detail in the book. But, the Watchers, what they did was not haphazard. They had a plan. And this was a very well thought out plan, because they knew that when they were going to descend to the earth, that they were committing a grave transgression. That's why they bound each other by an oath. Look, if one of us is going to get in trouble for this, we're all going down together.
That's it.
Because they knew the gravity of what they were doing. And what they were doing was, as I said, extremely calculated. And when they came down to the earth, they didn't just descend into the plains around Mount Hermon and begin to, take women at will and rape them. No, what they did was they married them. They married these women. They took them as wives. And so what I see happening here, and again what I detail in the book, is that there was a transaction that took place, because the book of Enoch, which your viewers are probably very familiar with, in the book of Enoch it talks about that the Watchers taught mankind the secrets that they were striving to learn. So the Watchers knew, and you talk about the black market, this exchange of knowledge, they already knew what mankind was trying to learn, and so they came down with a bargain. We're going to give you the knowledge that you're striving to learn, and what do we want in return? We want your daughter's hands in marriage. In return. And so there was an exchange, technology for the daughters, and I believe, and this is my postulation, the daughters of Cain. And I talk about why I believe it was the daughters of Cain, the line of Cain, not specifically the daughters of Cain, but the line of Cain, the women in the line of Cain. So the Watchers made a transaction. Here's the knowledge. You give us your daughter's hands in marriage, legally. Give us your daughter's hands in marriage. And what came of this transaction was, of course, they wrought great destruction in the earth and the giants and so forth. But there was a transaction that occurred, and it has to do with the human birthright.
What you're doing is making real that which is kind of a fuzzy, ill-defined history. The universe as seen from our side of the curtain. And you put things together, and as you get toward the end of the book, things get very much clearer, and you make a couple of postulates there. So let's go a little farther.
Okay. In the beginning of the book, I lay out, so the first half of the book is kind of laying the theological foundation for what I'm headed towards. So I go all the way from Adam, actually I start in a pre-Adamic context, move through the creation of Adam, all the way through the Watchers and the flood of Noah, because I'm making my way to one of the most important topics that we could possibly discuss, which is what's imminent on the horizon, which is a post-human paradigm. So we're moving towards this reality on planet Earth where human beings regular old organic human beings are going to be pretty scarce in the future, according to the projection that I see going forward, the trajectory that we're on. We are headed for a post-human paradigm very clearly. And so this has to do, in my mind, this has to do very much with the return of Christ, the Battle of Armageddon, and where all of this is ultimately headed. That final confrontation where Christ comes and vanquishes the beast and the empire, then destroys the empire of the beast. So that is, that's, you know, the final chapter in the book is called Jacob and Esau. And so I start all the way in the pre-Adamic context and move all the way forward to the Battle of Armageddon, the return of Christ. And I try and connect all these dots, including the Watchers and everything, to demonstrate that what's about to happen on earth is that mankind is about to sell his birthright for a bowl of stew. And this is a cunning ploy by our adversary, who is seeking to usurp our birthright and make war with the Son of God, who is returning to reclaim it.
Well summarized. And hold it right there, because this is the book by Timothy Alberino. It's called Birthright, and we're going to pause here and let you know how you get this book, not only this book, but a bonus set of DVDs.
I think it's safe to say that Timothy Alberino has spent more time than most exploring God's plan for the future of humanity. Tim's book will be a breath of fresh air for those of us who want to understand the mysterious things that have occurred in the ancient past. His unique insights focus on an ages-old battle between Jesus and the fallen cherub Lucifer, who once led a heavenly rebellion that fractured heaven and earth and led to the creation of man. Lucifer's desire to destroy humanity, men and women made in the image of God, is hard for us to fathom. But throughout history, he's tried to destroy everything God called good. Tim's research on the genetic hybrids of Genesis 6 led directly to the catastrophic flood of Noah and the near destruction of the entire human race. His hatred of mankind continues to this day through transhumanism, artificial intelligence, and the destruction of man's DNA. Tim's new book, Birthright, The Coming Post-Human Apocalypse, is available through our ministry for your gift of $30 or more, with shipping and handling included anywhere in the USA. We'll also include a free bonus DVD as our way of thanking you for your faithful support of Prophecy Watchers. We want to continue to bring you fascinating guests and open the pages of the Bible in new and exciting ways. Simply call the toll-free number you see on your screen to get Tim's book and support our ministry. Tim played a big part in the True Legends DVD series, a worldwide adventure tour that's jam-packed with trips to places most of us could never hope to visit in our lifetime. These 4 DVDs, Technology of the Fallen, Unholy Sea, Holocaust of the Giants, and Forbidden History, will take you on a whirlwind tour through the mysterious world of biblical archaeology. In this series, Tim searches for the remnants of the Nephilim all over the world, explores the Great Nephilim Museum cover-up, and exposes the hidden secrets of the Grand Canyon and the Vatican. When you choose the True Legends DVD series for your gift of $120 or more, we're going to send you Tim's new book, Birthright, as a free bonus. Shipping, as always, is included in the USA. You can find this offer and many others in our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. I suspect that when we get to heaven, we're going to be surprised at some of the things that we missed. Who thinks about the weapons Satan and his angels might use to fight against God Almighty? Or the role the mysterious cherubim played in the Garden of Eden? Well, as you heard today, Tim Alberino does. I know you're going to enjoy his unique research into these curious subjects. Thanks for tuning in today. Be sure to tune in next week for another fascinating look into the past and the exciting eternal future Jesus has prepared for us in his Father's house.
Well, Tim, I've been listening, and just kind of imagining where you went to pick this up and how you connected all these ideas together. I did read the book, and the last chapter, you sort of go elsewhere in that last chapter, into another world. And let's go there for a moment. Where was your mind when you were putting that together?
Well, the the thread that you can follow from beginning to end in this book
Right.
is the gospel of Christ.
Right.
That's really the main, primary, and most important theme that is being traced through the ages, through this book from beginning to end, from pre-Adam to Armageddon. And so the final chapter is about the return of Christ and the dynamics that are happening on the earth when he returns, from my perspective, and I believe from the biblical perspective. And it's really a dystopian nightmare that we're going to be experiencing on earth directly preceding the return of Christ. And so the last chapter just describes what's going to happen when humanity arrives at this post-human paradigm, which is what I call a new golden age. It's the resurrection of what I designate as the empire of the gods from the old world. In other words, it's a time in which there's great corruption in the earth, just like in the days of Noah, as Christ referenced when talking about the end of the age. So that's the final chapter. That's really the crescendo of the whole thing, and it's really good news because Christ is victorious and he crushes the empire of the beast.
And thousands of people, maybe millions, on horses, and our Lord on a beautiful horse, leading an army, and these massive battles going on. And you try to get your head wrapped around all that.
Yeah, and I have a different perspective because than most people. I should say I have a different view of what that battle is going to look like because, I talk about, I believe that the armaments that are, and here's a question to express what I was about to say. Here's a question that I always used to think when I was younger, and this is one of those things I really started to contemplate when I was in the Amazon. I had a lot of time to think in the Amazon. What kind of weapons do men bring in a war against God? Because this is where it's headed. We all know that because Armageddon isn't just a war against Israel. Armageddon is a war against God. And we know that because of Psalm 2. I believe Psalm 2 is depicting this final conflict between man and God. And of course, man being led by the beast and the dragon and so forth against God and the powers of darkness. And Psalm 2 is, why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? And the kings of the earth and the rulers are basically conspiring against the Lord and against his anointed son, right? And so this isn't just a war against Israel. This is a war against the Father and his Son. And so what kind of weapons do you bring when your intention is to go to war with God? And that's a very interesting question, and I try to answer it in the book.
And you got to read the book. It's called Birthright, Timothy Alberino. Tim, the clock disappeared during this interview because I'm really interested in what you have to say, and you're going to have to come back and talk with us some more.
Absolutely.
I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.